If you're a man who could not be with a woman who is more successful than you, who earns more money than you, I think that really shows how uncomfortable you are with your masculinity. Having a wife who is more successful than you isn't emasculating. Not being able to get your head around that fact is.
Hey guys, this is part 2 of a video series. If you haven't seen part 1, then you need to, because this is just about to jump into a direct continuation of the first part. And so you're going to be missing some of the context. You can find the link for part 1 in the pinned comment below. So make sure to go down there, watch that first, and then you can come to this video where I continue to challenge and maybe even eviscerate Jett's thoughts on masculinity. Assuming that you have already seen that part, then let's jump right into the rest of the video.
For example, I'm very emotional. I have no shame in admitting that I cry from time to time, maybe once or twice a month. And I don't mind being vulnerable, I don't mind opening up. This YouTube channel is evidence of that, it's a testament to that. Again, I think many would argue that makes me unmasculine, but I'd counter that. I think it actually emasculates you if you never open up and show emotion and be vulnerable, because you don't have the confidence to show a softer side.
So earlier he said that masculinity has nothing to do with confidence, but now he's saying that you are less masculine if you are not confident enough to show a softer side. Does that seem like a contradiction to anyone else? Also, I wouldn't say that it emasculates you. I would, however, say that it effeminizes you. Now, you may be thinking, this dude's a whack job, those words mean the same thing, but remember, I told you that I'm an English nerd, and I believe that there is a slight but important difference here. You see, the word effeminize comes from this Latin word, and this translates to the idea of, to make more feminine. On the other hand, emasculate comes from this Latin word, which translates to the idea of castration. Once we translate these words to Latin and then back into English, we now have a greater understanding that these are two pretty different ideas. I don't think that it makes you less of a man to cry, but that doesn't mean that liberally feeling and expressing your emotions is not a feminine trait. When it comes to pursuing your goal, remember our 3-part definition of masculinity earlier. How we feel about it really doesn't have a whole lot to do with achieving the goal. This is why people like Alex Hormozy exist. Happiness for him was never the goal. Instead, he put the work that he needed to in every day, no matter how he felt. That is true masculinity. As I've hinted at already in this video, there are benefits for both men and women to express both masculine and feminine traits. It just depends on the context. Let's continue.
I'm confident enough with my masculinity to show my femininity, but sadly, not many men are allowed to feel this way. They've been raised to suppress and hide their emotions, to always man up. In England in 2023, according to the Samaritans, the male suicide rate was 17.1 per 100,000, compared to a female suicide rate of 5.6 per 100,000. The reason more men than women commit suicide is because of the stigma that surrounds showing emotion as a man.
I call hard BS on this. This, by the way, is the point that I was kind of hinting at earlier that he would oversimplify. Is there a stigma against men expressing their emotions? Sure. Do I think that that plays a role in the rate at which men take their own lives? Sure. But that by no means is the only difference between men and women. Just one example is that By and large, if a woman reveals that she has had an awful sexual thing happen to her at the hands of usually a man, then society and individuals will come around this person, sympathize with them, support them, things like that. However, if the same thing happens to a man, there is much less support. Now, I don't want to get too fixated on that issue because it's just not the focus of this video. I only use that as an example of another way in which men and women are different and live different lives, which would therefore contribute to differences in the rate at which both of the sexes take their lives.
For a man, strength and vulnerability have become seen as conflicting traits, that they're polar opposites, but I believe they can coexist.
I completely agree. Let's go.
If society allowed men to be both strong and vulnerable, I don't think this shocking statistic would be anywhere near as damning. I think the rates would be much more equal between men and women.
Jett can believe whatever he wants to about this issue, but I really don't think that men joining the crying circles featured in Fight Club is really going to have that much of an effect. Additionally, I really don't understand how he missed the mark so hard on this one. You see, the goal when it comes to the rate at which men and women take their lives has nothing to do with equality. We know this because if the women's rate were to raise to 17.1 to match men, we wouldn't exactly be throwing a pizza party. Instead, the goal is to get the rate to 0 as quickly as possible, everywhere. Every person who does not take a permanent action to solve a temporary solution is a win. Moving on.
As I mentioned at the start, masculinity is a social construct.
Are you sure about that?
Whatever the period in history demands of a man, that's how a man will be defined. In ancient civilizations, for example Spartan culture, masculinity was tied to a physical strength because of the demands of battle. During the Industrial Revolution, masculinity was about being the breadwinner as men moved from farms to factories. During the World Wars, men were sent to the front lines and were expected to suppress any fear, grief and vulnerability as they put their country first.
He presents these as distinct eras from one another where the role of a man is completely different, but really these are all expressions of the same masculinity. In all three examples, men left the comfort of their own homes to defeat the enemy, whether that enemy is another nation or if we apply that a bit more liberally and just take that to mean work, so that the elderly, the women, and the children were able to enjoy happier and more peaceful lives.
But now, for probably the first time ever in human history, most of the world isn't demanding a man to play a certain role. Men aren't being asked to be anything. That's why I think the definition of masculinity has become so blurry, confusing, and debatable. There is no longer a set definition.
I would say that the definition of masculinity hasn't changed at all. What has changed, however, is society's demand for men to be masculine. As I mentioned before, three of the major components to this are globalization, advancements in technology, and greater equality among the sexes.
Some will celebrate emotional openness and vulnerability like me, and others will find those particular traits emasculating. Masculinity once had a clear societal role. Now, it doesn't really have one at all. This also means that we're now left with two extremes. We have toxic masculinity, and we have a portion of the female gender who think all men are trash, that men are pigs. I think both extremes are as unhelpful as each other, but I'm going to start with toxic masculinity. This is the term used to describe the harmful stereotypes about manhood, like suppressing your emotions, acting aggressively, and rejecting any traits perceived as feminine.
He's wrong on 2 of the 3 points. When it comes to suppressing your emotion or acting aggressively, these are not simply negative things. Let's say, for example, I'm at a funeral and a funny memory comes to mind. Should I not suppress my emotion and instead selfishly mock the reverence of the ceremony? Or let's say I'm with my child and we're in kind of a scary situation. Should I not suppress my fears so that they can feel more confident and safe because, well, if dad isn't scared, then maybe I don't need to be scared. We're going to be okay. Expression of everything you feel all the time is not obviously a good thing. Neither, by the way, is completely suppressing it. Additionally, being aggressive is not always negative either. For example, if you're being bullied, I don't think that the right thing to do is just to kowtow and just do whatever they want you to. Instead, if you can be aggressive and show, hey, I'm not someone who's going to allow you to treat me badly, then maybe you never have to deal with it again. Or maybe you're caught in a dark alley and there's someone who wants to do you genuine harm. Then, in that case, I think acting with aggression is probably your best hope. Neither of these issues are as simple as Jett is making them out to be. Instead, we require discernment, a word which here means the ability to know what is best to do in any given situation.
I think a large part of why some men are toxically masculine is because they feel lost and also threatened in today's society.
Fair.
Over the last 50 years, women's rights have rightly so become more equal to that of a man's. We've finally reached a point where a woman can have her own dreams, her own ambitions, and follow them without having to be an extension of her husband. I think the rise in toxic masculinity and why some men like Andrew Tate perpetuate some of the most sexist things ever uttered is because their brains aren't wired to see a woman more successful than them, more powerful than them. It almost goes against everything that they're taught. It hurts them. If you're a man who could not be with a woman who is more successful than you, who earns more money than you, I think that really shows how uncomfortable you are with your masculinity. Having a wife who is more successful than you isn't emasculating. Not being able to get your head around that fact is.
Bottom. Oh, what a zinger. Except there are a few problems with that right there. Like, for example, a man's core desires do not change simply because we tell him that they should. By the way, I will give this concession, there are definitely toxic men out there. In fact, even just the other day, I overheard a conversation of a few men talking about disciplining their children. From what I could tell of the words they were using and the tone in which they used them, it didn't seem like they were going, well, this is a necessary thing to do so that my child grows up to be a healthy, functioning member of society. It was a lot more about, wow, look at this control that I have over the people in my home. And for those people, I actually completely agree with Jett. It's a very unmasculine way of doing things. You feel like you don't have power in the world and therefore you have to lord it over people who are kind of held hostage by you. It's not good. However, again, Jett oversimplifies the issue. Yes, there are those men, but there are also men who want to be successful so that they can provide a happy, healthy existence for their families. They want to take on the burdens inherent to life and put them on their shoulders so that their families can suffer less. This is a pure and wonderful masculinity that unfortunately in discussions like this does not get to see the light of day very often. Additionally, it isn't only men who want to be in this more successful position. Women, many women, also want men to be the more successful one. They want to not have to worry about making decisions. They want to only work if they really want to. They want the ability to raise a family and make sure that their kids are getting the absolute best care that they can give from someone who cares about them more than a random stranger or daycare worker ever could. These ideas have become less popular to express in recent decades, but based off of conversations that I've had, I have the belief that there are still a significant amount of women who have these desires, who desire that life, and who therefore want a man, a good man, to be in that more powerful position in their lives. Does this mean that men should throw a tantrum and demand that women become less successful to appease some desire for power over them? No, not at all. I think that's probably one of the most unmasculine things I've ever heard of. Instead, the truly masculine man will go, okay, cool, these are the circumstances, these are the challenges that are in front of me, and I just have to figure it out. I am going to take these negative feelings that I have of not being as successful as I want to be, and use that as motivation so that I can become that man that I know she wants me to be. That's the truly masculine way.
On the other hand, you have some females talking as if all men are the same. I've lost count of the amount of podcast clips I've seen where a female on the podcast has said that men are trash, that men are pigs. And you open up the comments and you see thousands and thousands of people agreeing, and the post has thousands and thousands of likes. I remember girls at college and school saying the exact same thing, and it broke my heart then, and it breaks my heart now. I understand that those who say that may have been emotionally and or physically hurt by a male. They may have had an awful experience with a man. But
not a fan of the word "but" here, I have to say. As you probably know, the inclusion of the word "but" lessens the power and importance of everything that comes before it. When that is directed to the abuse of women at the hands of men, I think that's a hell of a thing to put before the word "but."
But negatively labelling an entire gender because of the faults of a few is just as toxic as those who believe in male supremacy.
I hardcore disagree with this. Not to sound like too much of a white knight or anything, but I would much rather deal with a false accusation of being a trash pig of a man rather than any woman getting physically abused. One is clearly worse than the other. At least to me. Is that a hot take? Am I the only one? Additionally, the negative label is going to be a lot less harmful than male supremacy led by awful men.
So, back to the very, very beginning. What is masculinity in 2025? It's a question I don't think society can answer anymore. Only we as individuals can.
No. We cannot define everything however we want and expect there to be no consequences.
We will all have our own definitions because we live in a time that doesn't require a set definition. That's partly great. We have the chance to get rid of the stereotypes that have ruled the male gender for thousands and thousands of years. Men no longer always have to be strong physically and mentally and unemotional.
But this is a bad thing, because now we have men who are less capable and more purposeless than ever before in history. Strength, physically, mentally, emotionally, is a good thing, as long as it is not used to harm the innocent.
But it's also partly bad. Some men are taking advantage of it and are trying to maintain the gender's dominance over the other. Some women are taking advantage of it and are bashing the majority because of the mistakes of the minority. For me, masculinity is about strength and resilience, but these qualities should no longer come at a cost of emotional openness, compassion, and vulnerability. The real strength of a man should no longer be measured by how much weight he can lift, how much trauma life can throw at him before he finally cracks under the pressure. Masculinity is about a man having the courage to face his emotions and share them with those he trusts. It's not just about accepting femininity within society. It's about accepting femininity from within.
I disagree, surprising no one by this point. Masculinity is not at all about accepting being more feminine. That's a strange contradiction in terms that muddies both definitions and puts femininity as something better than masculinity. I don't think that either is better than the other. I think that they are different, complementary, useful, and necessary. I think, just like I said before, that both men and women would benefit from developing their masculine and feminine sides. Yes, men and women are better off if they are able to express their emotions, but they're also better off if they are strong, if they're resilient, and if they can take on the challenges of life. Hey, thanks for getting to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. And if you've gotten here, then chances are that you have some thoughts, whether they be that you agree with me and you go, wow, that was really well put together, or maybe you vehemently disagree with me. I would love to have a conversation with you. And I think that the best way to do that is not necessarily just to leave a comment or even make a response video, though you can do all of those things. I think the best thing to do is to go to the top link in the description, and that will bring you to my free school community. There we can talk directly, we can get on a video call, we can do it in DMs, whatever you're comfortable with. I'd really like to know your thoughts when it comes to this topic. Where am I off base? And where did I maybe throw something in there that you've never heard before and you kind of like? Who knows? You do, obviously, and I would love to. And so I would love if you went down to the link in the description and jumped in. But right before you do that, make sure to leave a like on this video and to subscribe so you can support me and so I can know that people are actually interested in this stuff and I can keep on doing this. If you have any ideas for videos that you'd like for me to make, I only take video suggestions from people who are in my school community. So that's another reason for you to jump in there. But with that all said, I'm going to let you guys go, and I will see you in the next video.